It is unrealistic to expect a superintendent, a building principal, division head, head of school, who has so many other really important responsibilities to understand how that changing technology landscape can strategically help the school or district from an operational or programmatic perspective. And that forward thinking strategic leadership is a crucial piece of a solid technology director or CIO.
Welcome to Learning Through Technology, a K-12 EdTech podcast proudly presented by STS Education. I'm Alex Inman, founder of Educational Collaborators.
And I'm Bob Cireddu, founder of the EduTech Group. We're here to bring educators together, helping them unlock the full potential of learning through technology.
Tune in every other week as we connect with education leaders and dive deep into topics that matter to you, delivering actionable ideas straight to your school. Welcome to the show.
Alex, today we're going to talk about something both you and I know, how to hire your next or to find your next tech director and the challenges that you'll come across in today's world in education.
Yeah, it should be a good conversation. And this is kind of one of your favorite kinds of episodes and on a topic that we both know and understand well and are happy to help schools with. And it's also a good one for us to kind of end on, because what we're going to do is take like a 2-month pause after this episode. We will be running some other sort of repeat episodes, but we're going to take a short pause on new episodes for a couple of months. So let's get into the one that we enjoy chatting about.
Sounds good. Alex, this conversation is very timely in my world. Last spring, we were contacted by a school district to talk about the impending retirement of their longtime tech director, 25 years there, done all the stuff you and I had done, built the network there, brought on the first security cameras and phone system, moved to voice over IP, and he knew everything from the beginning to the end, but he was retiring. Doesn't that kind of sound nice, Alex? He was retiring, and we're the same generation of tech directors, the same cohort, I think, is the term I've heard used. We all started in the late 90s, perhaps early 2000s, when technology came into schools. Well, this school was looking to replace him, and they contacted us. EduTech does this kind of work all the time for schools where we're their tech director, an on-site tech person, and bring a whole team with skill set. And they talked to us, and it was a really good conversation. But in the end, they decided to hire somebody in-house, or not in-house, but they decided to hire their own employee. And just in the last week, the superintendent reached out to me and sent an email and said, that has had mixed results. We have found that the skill sets necessary to be a tech director today exceed the skill sets of a single person. And that superintendent's not wrong. And it's not the tech director's fault. It's not the superintendent's fault. And it's certainly not the employee's fault. It's just the way the world has come these days. So it's a good thing for us to talk about, I think.
Yeah, well, it's not uncommon. We are reaching kind of the end of the first generation tech director. And it's not insignificant, because there are a lot of districts and schools that hired the willing volunteer or the willing teacher. A lot of tech directors were the classroom teacher who wasn't afraid to reboot a computer or crawl under a table and connect some wires. And the job has changed dramatically since the start of that. But the challenge associated with this that I don't think enough people take the time to think about and recognize is, yes, there's a lot more technology in our schools than when we started. And yes, the complexity is there, like the superintendent that you mentioned said, but they don't really think about the fact that they were paying probably a lot less for somebody to go through that learning curve. Now that tech director who's leaving not only has the skill set for the complexity of today, but also the benefit of all of the troubleshooting and learning curve that happened over those 25 years. It's one thing to understand some of this. It's a whole other thing to have somebody who has the degree of experience and knowledge and wisdom of having gone through 25 years of, now we need to do what? It's a big deal.
And I think the key there is not just the technology. While the technology has evolved and we've seen huge leaps for one-to-one computing and wireless and voice over IP and all the other things that go into a tech director's bucket of work, it's the working in a school that is so much different. In my prior technology life, I worked as a systems engineer in private industry, and I worked as a system administrator in private industry. And it is a whole world different to work with schools. And even when these schools decide, okay, well, we'll outsource, finding people to fix computers is easy compared to finding people who understand schools.
That's right. Because you're not producing widgets. You don't have the kind of staffing. I read a great article. This is years old now, and I'd love to see the new data. But it talked about staffing ratios of tech people in various industries, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a Gardner report or something, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably where it came from, is Gartner, but years ago. So good luck finding it. But if I do find it, I'll throw it into the show notes. But the staffing ratio in school, I'll go the other direction in the article, the reason. And it was Gartner, and then, it was National Business Officers Association also did some of their own data. Okay, so we'll start with schools. The average full-time employee, FTE, for the number of devices in schools, this is pre-COVID, okay, was about 1 to 1,500 in public schools. It was about 1 to 800 or 900 in private schools. And in most of the commercial industry, it was 1 to 60 devices, 1 to 60 devices versus 1 to 900 or 1,500. And this is also that data is also pre the massive expansion of Chromebooks, which I think can have a pretty big impact on at least your number of devices. But what it says, the thesis is still the same. The expectation of service delivery of somebody in a school IT department is radically larger than that of a person in industry. And in two ways, it's radically larger. One, you just have a lot more people that you are responsible for talking to, responding to, meeting the needs of. But the other is, because of that, you're not able to be as granular as our colleagues in corporate IT. You're not just the mail person. You're not just the firewall person. You're the technology person. And that means you have to be much more of a generalist in your approach. And you have to talk to a lot more people and have soft skills in an entirely different way.
You talk about that, and my head floods with all of the things that you have to do. I tell people when they talk about managing a network for a school and managing a network or a data center industry, and the fact is those 1,000 to every one full-time person or more, they're trying to get around your network. They're not employees who are there to do their best, to collect a paycheck, and they're not throwing rocks. And if I'd been that student, I'm that guy. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to get around it. Everybody who knows me knows that's me. That's how I ended up in IT. How can I fix this so it works better for me? How can I get around the firewall, the filtering, the network? How can I get those credentials? So you have people who are actively trying to circumvent the work you're doing.
Yeah, and that's entirely different, right? Like, you can't just go hire somebody who has networking skills from a corporate world and expect that they're going to come into this environment and succeed. And the corporate response to most of those is policies and lock things down. And admittedly, some schools do that too. But culturally, there's a huge difference. This is actually a nice little sort of transition to the next thing that I was wanting to talk about with hiring tech people, is the DNA of a school is about student growth. So we're going to create more room, more opportunity for growth than a typical corporate world. And that's a huge difference when you're getting into schools. And it speaks to sort of the second sort of pillar of as I think about the responsibilities of a school technology director. One is certainly manage the IT, which comes with an incredible degree of complexity. And you have to have an incredibly broad set of skills in order to succeed at that job. Whether you're the person who's doing it or overseeing it, you're overseeing a lot. And you have to have those soft skills. But then the other part is that ed tech component. Why do we have technology in schools? Yes, to improve our operations like a business. But another massive part of the reason for having technology in schools is to create more engaging and deeper involved student learning experiences. And that's a different kind of animal, and it opens up a different kind of risk to your network. So yeah, you're right. It comes with the network complexity to it, but that doesn't go away because of the other goal, which is to create environments that get students more involved in using the technology in their work.
Oh, here's where Alex transitions us to talking about the goal of schools for student enrichment. Our goal isn't to produce 20 more widgets per hour. Our goal isn't to sell 4 more cars today or every day. And it's an ever-moving target.
That's right. And it comes with that piece of the job, comes not only with some of the technical concerns that we were talking about, right? But it also comes, and the soft skills that we were talking about, the ability to talk to teachers, but also it demands that it comes with an understanding of how and why technology can be used to advance the mission and program of the school. And teachers need to be supported in this because whereas, I was never formally trained to be a technology director. I have 3 communications degrees. I had to learn on the job. Now, yes, I have like a Linux certificate and a NetWare certificate and an MCSE, and I've got some technical training now, but I got that while I was working on the job. Same thing is true very much for our classroom teachers. These teachers were trained to teach, and depending upon their age, they may or may not have been trained how to use technology in their lesson design and assessment. But if your school believes that students need to use technology in their learning, then teachers need to be trained how to use that ever-changing technology landscape to meet those students' goals. I don't know many people coming out of CIS programs in college that have learned that.
None at all. So you got those certificates once you figured out how to hook up the printer and download the templates, right?
That's right.
What do we want to be certified in today?
Well, what am I doing certified in? That is how I got my internet certificate in yodelology, by the way. So, for the record.
I think that's also how you can marry people now, right? The ordained, Allison. So we kind of set the table about what the landscape looks like or what some of the challenges are. And we could go on and on about all the challenges. But I think we could talk a little bit about how or what to look for in your tech director or in the right person.
So I totally want to go there, Bob. And that's right. And I want us to, because you and I both have some experience in that. One more pillar I want to talk about in terms of what you're looking for in a tech director. So there's the IT side. They clearly need to have the technical skills in order to succeed in that role. There's the ed tech side. They need to understand mission, vision, teachers' needs, and be able to support that, or know how to manage or oversee somebody who can do that. And then the last part is also strategic visioning, because this technology landscape is changing all the time. It is unrealistic to expect a superintendent, a building principal, division head, head of school, who has so many other really important responsibilities to understand how that changing technology landscape can strategically help the school or district from an operational or programmatic perspective. And that forward-thinking strategic leadership is a crucial piece of a solid technology director or CIO. We've had some folks from the Atlas organization on here, Association for Technology Leaders in Independent Schools. And they're a professional association whose job is to help tech directors understand how to be strategic leaders for their schools. And I think this is actually a more unique challenge. I think years ago, Bob, when you and I were starting, superintendents knew this, right? They knew that they couldn't handle that piece of the job. And so they put their tech directors on the leadership team, cabinet, executive committee, whatever they have. Nowadays, there's enough superintendents, principals, they all use technology in their day-to-day lives. And so they think, I think in a lot of ways, that they have what they need to provide that strategic vision for technology. But they don't have the time to understand how that landscape is changing and be able to look far enough down the road. I don't think that can be overlooked, Bob.
I am thwarted again, Alex. You said, you interrupted me, and then you're like, I want to talk about this. And I'm like, he's going to talk about what I was going to lead into. But no, you are correct. I was not going to talk about that. And it's clearly perhaps the most important part, because it not only lays the groundwork for what students will be doing, but you have to build. So many times we see technology drive what's curriculum. Oh, we're going to do this because we have this technology. It should be the other way around, right? Curriculum should decide, this is what we want to accomplish. What technology do we need? Or what technology can we support? And that goes one way, but really it starts at, if we know what technology and what our plan is 5 years ahead, everybody wins. The teachers know what they need to understand. The students know what they're going to work in. The chief financial officers know how to budget for it. In the boards, understand what the school is trying to accomplish in their mission, in vision, as you say. So I think we've laid some of the groundwork here of what you're looking for. But as we transition more into what we're going to talk about in how to identify that person or find them, I'll add this as a transition is everybody who listens to us, both of you, know Alex is the outgoing guy and I'm not. I know, right? You just got that, Alex, right? The both of you listening to us. Hi, Mom and Dad. Alex is the outgoing one and I am not. I'm not very comfortable in front of large groups, regardless of what Sophia and Alex think when they sign me up to be in front of large groups. But it's a part of the job. And it's very difficult to learn soft skills. It is much easier to learn how to stand up a VM in a Hyper-V environment than it is to learn how to be comfortable saying yes and saying no and providing proper feedback to somebody who may sign your checks that you don't really want to do that. And that's very difficult for a lot of technical people. I speak as one of them. Maybe, Alex, you have some thoughts on how to identify that person that you could mold into a person with soft skills, or how to identify that soft skills and then train on the technical skills.
Yeah, it's the people who they're going to be interacting with need to be part of that sort of interview process and also defining the job descriptions. And actually, can I even start a half a step back and then get to your question? The kind of transitioning from your good technology director needs to be strategic in nature. You as a school need to know what you're looking for in your technology director first. And there are schools who really want a tech person to be nothing other than a pipes and wires kind of person. And if that's the case, just before you go hire that kind of person, you need to have a very clear understanding as a school or district, how is technology going to serve your mission, vision, and program? And if you have other ways to meet those soft skill needs, those ed tech needs, that's fine. Just make sure that you define those before you say, I need a technical tech director who's going to be more about those pipes and wires. That's fine. Even still, that person is going to be interfacing with various people in the community. And you need to be thinking about how you want them to be able to interface with those folks and then use that audience as part of your interviews. So I think it starts with defining the expectations that you have within your own organization. And then once you define those expectations, start creating the kinds of interactions in the interview. One, make sure that those expectations are clarified in your job description. And then once they're in your job description, make sure that the people who are going to be responsible for evaluating that are actually involved in the interview process.
I think this might be a time to talk about the two paths there. You talked about the pipes and wires. I don't know what the heck that is. I always say a ones and zeros kind of tech director. That's what I was, a ones and zeros kind of tech director who came from more of an engineering and technical background. But then there are also those that come from an education background that are the teachers that we talked about early on. Like that tech director 1.0 was usually somebody who came out of a classroom, was most comfortable with technology, who started doing stuff as a volunteer because they knew it, they found it interesting. So I think we should talk about what you were saying is you could start with that decision tree. Do we want technical? Do we want somebody that's a certified person, perhaps? And know that either of those is going to need a support structure around them because they're two different paths, two different experiences, two different knowledge bases.
Yeah. And sometimes they need to be two different people, depending upon the expectations that you might have, which is an important thing to define. But you're right, Bob. I'm glad that you kind of structured it that way. Like once you sort of decide what is it that your program wants and needs, what are the expectations that you have for the person in that program? What kind of person are we going to hire? Then what kind of support systems need to exist for that person to make sure that they can meet all of the expectations that you have for that? And that's why I said I had to go get a certificate in Novell and Microsoft and Linux in order to do the job. You were talking about it's not hard to set up a VM in Hyper-V, right? And I was like, yeah, see, I've never done that. I know how to do that in VMware, but I don't know how to do that in Hyper-V.
You can feel your way to it. Trust me.
Well, and that's just it. And I think that you said this earlier too, and I want to kind of come back to this, is it's easier to kind of hire somebody who can be successful in schools and train them the technology than it is to hire somebody who has the technology skills and train them how to be successful in a school. That's huge. Now, just because somebody who can be successful in a school may have come from a nonprofit, may have come from a hospital, there are other environments that are more like schools in terms of the service orientation and the generalist approach that's necessary. So I'm not saying that you can only hire somebody who's been at a school, but it sure helps if they've been able to be successful in a school setting.
Now I'm going to go back on something you said that makes it all the more difficult to hire. Is I had this with a current client who had found this great. We found a great network. They were having network problems. That's why they were looking for somebody new when they retired. And they found this great network engineer. And they're like, oh, we're hiring him from a big Fortune 500 company. And he came in and he made their network hum. Like for the first 2 months of the summer, started July 1, no students, sat down, no load on the network, got it working great. And then like 2 weeks in, they're like, we have 100 Chromebooks that need to be repaired. And he's like, I don't repair Chromebooks. He learned how to repair the Chromebooks and started repairing Chromebooks and immediately started hating life because that's not what that person wanted to do, is to be a hardware person repairing Chromebooks. Didn't want to be the person writing scripts to create accounts. We forget how specialized IT has become outside of education, because in education, we're used to calling the guy or calling the girl who knows how to do it all, and they do it all.
Right. And that's one of the biggest challenges with hiring somebody who's not worked in schools before, is they don't have that context. They don't have that understanding. And so if the hiring team doesn't understand how necessary that was, then they're not really in a position to communicate that to the candidates who are coming in to set those expectations. So how do you fix that? So let me toot your horn for a minute. Okay. And Bob's like, do what?
Take 2 minutes to toot my horn. As many minutes as you'd like. If about time my horn got tooted on this show.
Well, there are plenty of technology managed service providers. And I'm seeing more and more schools start to move to managed service providers because they need fractional positions. They're smaller organizations, or network has become so solid and sort of self-managed with the smarter devices that you need to do less. And so I don't need to have a full network manager. I really only need a part. And so they start to look to MSPs for that. And what you at EduTech do is provide that sort of fractional support. But everyone working with EduTech is coming from a school background. So I think if you have decided to move into the MSP sort of solution, I know like 3 in the entire country, MSPs or shared service providers, where their focus is almost entirely K-12 education. So that is one option, because if you don't have the skill sets to know, then you need to outsource to somebody who does. And I think another option is there are hiring firms that are specific to K-12 technology education. And you can look at those. And we can even put some in the show notes as well. But it's important to make sure that if you don't have the skill set to go hire for that, that you use someone or leverage someone to do that. Now, those people can also be expensive. So one resource that I definitely will put into the show notes is, this is particularly good for small districts and independent schools. There's this, I'm on a listserv that run out of Syracuse, but run really by a bunch of school tech directors that I've been on for years. And I don't know, probably about 20 years ago, somebody said, hey, do you have a job description for X, Y, and Z? And they just turned it into a folder that has been managed and curated and dealt with over the last several years. And so I've got this resource folder, it's publicly accessible, that just has scores of job descriptions. And you can look at them and just use them to help you define some of your expectations. And it's just a free resource, but all created by schools and shared by schools. But it's a resource for schools to look at. And the way I would use it is not take one of those and then slap it up as your job description, what I would do is take those, look at the several job descriptions associated with the position you're seeking to hire, and then use those to define your own job expectations. Now, you need some help turning that into your own job description. That's a great thing for like AI, ChatGPT, or Claude to do, is take those expectations, say, here are my expectations, here's my salary, here are the parameters, make a job description for me. But there are too many good resources out there to let the sort of mistakes that I'm seeing, that Bob, you saw and kind of started this episode with. There's too many resources out there for schools to allow those mistakes to happen, because those mistakes are enormously expensive, especially when you think about the time, the opportunity loss cost, the technology.
So that's correct. Boy, I desperately want to say this. I feel like you owe me a couple more minutes of tooting my horn because you came up short there on how much time you spent. But my original story about the school that transitioned from their longtime tech director retiring to a new one, a lot of that data is lost now, because if you're somebody who knows schools, like Alex, if you were going to take that job, you would have known the questions to ask. The tech director was leaving under good terms. He was more than happy to share everything he knew, but of course he's not going to know everything to share. There's a million things he did that didn't think about every day. But you would know as a school person and as a tech person to ask those questions, so that transition was twice as effective. But now that's gone. That tech director is retired for a year. There was somebody who came in who didn't know what questions to ask about operating, about performance. And I don't mean performance of a network. I mean, what are your expectations for our department? What are your expectations for the school's technology? And didn't ask those questions. Now, if we are fortunate and start working with this school, we have lost that opportunity. We will be starting from scratch or nearly scratch because we don't have that overlap time with that retiring tech director. So it is costly to make that mistake there. And it's a cost that you pay for years. I know working with schools where we come in and somebody is left abruptly, or somebody, where they made a mistake and hired the wrong person, or they hired the wrong company, that for years, 2-3 years, you find this, oh, why is this like this? Why is this policy in place? In Active Directory or in Entra ID, why is this policy in place? Why are accounts being created like this? Why is this OU here? And you got to work backwards to figure it out, because as soon as you change it, you break something.
Yeah. Now I'll toot my own horn for a minute.
Oh, now I bet there's more than 2 minutes here. Go ahead. Let's see. I'll start the clock.
Well, Educational Collaborators does EdTech audits, right? And they really are a pretty in-depth 360 of your technology program. It takes 3 or 4 months for us to get this done with your community. But it is the kind of thing that can really help stage an incoming tech director. Now, we recommend that it either be done preferably actually before that person leaves, if it's going to be a retirement is coming and you know it, because like you said, Bob, you've been doing this for 25 years. You don't know what necessarily to share, because some of this stuff is like water to you, right? It's like air. An EdTech audit gives an outsider who understands these best practices a chance to recognize, document, gather all these things, get a third-party perspective of the challenges, and then work on that. If that doesn't happen and you don't have that opportunity, it can be done afterwards. And at least it gets that new person up to speed a lot faster and helps them understand the things that they need to understand from a school perspective that they might not have understood coming into the job.
Now I feel horribly inadequate, Alex. EdTech has taken on schools that you've done tech audits for, the Educational Collaborators, and it makes things much better, because you've got a template of these are the questions and these are the follow-up questions and the follow-up questions that lead to a true understanding of what is going on in a technology department, not just the ones and zeros, but how funding works, how purchases are approved, what needs board approval, what doesn't need board approval, that outgoing tech director who only retires once, maybe twice sometimes, that only retires once or twice, doesn't know to pass along, and incoming may never know. And we find it very valuable, and we work with schools every day. I can't even imagine the value that's conveyed to a new individual, not into technology, but into schools. Now, this is why I'm horribly inadequate, because I didn't think that saying that is so true, and I blew it.
No, it's fine. But I think as much value as it brings the tech director, because they have that perspective and that sort of organized structure to all the needs, we take such a deliberate process in involving the rest of the community in it, it helps the community understand those expectations as well, because they don't know the questions to ask. And if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to set up somebody else for success? And so it's a nice way to sort of set the stage for that internal success. And if you're not going to hire that internal success, go with an MSP or outsource it to somebody who knows to ask those questions and who knows how to work within schools. Those are, I think, the big lessons that people can draw from this episode. And what I think over the next couple of years, Bob, is going to be a pretty massive, we're already seeing it with teachers. There's going to be a big change in teachers, a lot of teachers retiring. Same thing with tech directors. And it's expensive to not run your technology program well.
Yeah, the unfortunate answer for schools is that a lot of tech directors today look like us. Gray hair, no hair, lots of wrinkles. We've been around a while.
It's great when it grows. It is.
I'll believe that when I see it. But it is true that the tech director 1.0, that we were the first tech directors in schools, are retiring now because we were in our late 20s, early 30s when we took on those positions. And 25 or 30 years later, it's time for us to step aside.
Yeah. So best of luck to our listeners who are looking at changing their tech director in the next several years. And then check the show notes for some of these resources. And if there's anything that Bob or I can do to help you guys out and help you be successful with your schools, we very much want to see that for you.
That's funny. I was wondering if that would be appropriate. We would be happy to help our listeners in identifying what they need or what they can do when it comes time for their next tech director.
So I guess we're saying goodbye for a few months now.
Yeah, Alex, it's like summer vacation early for us. We get a little time off here for a couple of months. I'm wondering if Sophia's going to cue Schools Out by Alice Cooper when we're done here, so that we can get a couple of, that's the right way to go out as educators, right? We got to go out with Schools Out.
It is, but I'm sure she doesn't. She's never heard that song before.
Right. But yeah, we're going to take a couple of months off here. I think we're still going to have releases, and we just re-released Dr. Brown, Melvin Brown's, and we had 9,000 or 10,000 people view that episode. So there are some really good, I can't believe it because we have great guests, not because of us, but we have some really good episodes that we'll be bringing back while Alex and I work on our golf game.
Oh man, if that's what we're working on, we're going to be gone for more than 2 months.
We're going to go drive a golf cart with a sign on the back, Schools Out.
Well, and while we're gone, in addition to the replaying of several episodes, we want you to engage with us on Learning Through Technology on LinkedIn. So that page is still going to stay active, and we're still going to engage with folks during this time off there. So come and see us on LinkedIn.
Learning Through Technology, a K-12 EdTech podcast, is brought to you by STS Education, a Pacific OneSource company. To learn more about how educators can leverage technology to drive successful educational outcomes, check us out at www.stsed.com. Connect with us by searching for Learning Through Technology in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. On behalf of the team at STS Education, thanks for joining us.